Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Endgame. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we kind of get a little bit more insight into Owen's relationship to Sergey and Elena. Obviously, this dates back to 2016, Argentina, a job, undercover work he was doing that led to him eventually crossing paths with Elena and Sergey. But of course, they are well versed in what they do. They are really good at what they do, and they saw him coming a mile away, knowing exactly who he was from the very beginning, knowing that he was an FBI agent. But obviously, it turns out that this all translates back to the Bellics. Basically, when we got the flashbacks of Elena being like, yeah, the Bellics basically have connections to the U.S. And you're like, okay. And so it's a small mob family that you're like, right, this must be the same family that came after Elena. So like this has to date back to that. But you'd also wonder if it has any correlation to do with why her dad got killed and why they were trying to kill her. There might be some... I'm wondering, is it actually like a blood feud between like her family? Is it kind of like, if you've ever seen the show NCIS Los Angeles, Chris O'Donnell's character, I have not watched the show in years, but from what I remember, G, like he has his name is he's just called G because it's the only initial of Callan's they had. And so basically you find out his entire family was wiped out because it was like a long-standing blood feud. I don't think that storyline ever came back up. I think it was like to my recollection, like early-ish on in the show, I want to say it was like season 3 or something, they resolved that. I think that all ended. I could be remembering wrong, but I don't know if that's ever come back up. I think that storyline got resolved like earlier in the show, but I wonder if there's something of that ilk where like Elena is from a bloodline that the Bellics didn't like. And I guess maybe the reason why they wiped out Sergey's family is maybe because maybe it's just a mob family that's trying to like wipe out all the competition and being the only game in town. So maybe they try to go after Elena's family and then they went after Sergey's family. But then these two families who were wronged by the Bellics have now basically joined forces to wipe you out. You wiped us out, we're going to wipe you out. And that means destroying you from the inside out. But I think the Bellics have grown so powerful. There are probably members of the Bellic who probably risen to like US status, or at least they have such powerful friends in the US and connections that they're untouchable. So basically by unraveling all the red tape that is everything going on, like once again, the entire episode she's telling Val like, oh, don't call me a black hat, you know. It's like, right, she's the ends justify the means. I might have to do a little bit of evil. I love that line of, you may hate me now for what I'm doing, but at the end of the day you'll love me. So New York, do you love me? You know, and just chewing up the scenery. Because obviously things are escalating even more in the bank situation as we're entering day 3 of it, which is like, once again, I love that that's going to be like probably the crux of this season. I doubt this season is going to be long. Like, I'm sure it's probably only going to be like a 13 episode season, especially being the first season and all, but just for the story's sake, it's probably on the shorter end, but with the sake of it, like being like, no, we're setting it up built around these banks and stuff. Because one bank situation is resolved by the end of the episode, but there's still 6 others at play, so it's all they all play out the way they need to for the purposes of accomplishing whatever it is that Elena's trying to accomplish. In this particular episode, it was about Tyler Erickson. The moment she was like, yo, I want Tyler Erickson to like be on camera, you're like, oh, what did he do? You know that it's like, and even Valerie is like, okay, so what did he do? Because everyone else Elena's targeted before now has done some shady stuff. Like the 2 people that were in the room in the past 2 episodes is like, right, they were high-ranking people that were removed from the board because they did some very, very terrible things. So Elena's exposing the corruption that exists within this country. And it's like, what role does Tyler play in this? It's like, yeah, we're asking you about the Swan. He's like, what Swan? I don't know what that is about. But then there's storage unit that was on fire, which led to Ming Glee, a dead woman's body, who she had been in the freezer for 2 years, because she apparently committed suicide 2 years before, but here her body is in a freezer, and it just happened to thaw out. So I guess someone had cut the power to it like a week ago, and just like, once again, showing like, if the power had been out for like a week or whatever, that means they'd already planned this out, like to get to this point. Like, the forethought. To be fair, she's probably been planning this for years and years and years and building up a strategy. Like, I don't know if it's just her that's calculated everything. Like, it puts her on some, like, super villain level genius to orchestrate all of this. Like, everything is pieces on a chessboard to her, and she's thinking that many moves ahead is that wild to have this much setup. It's like, right, I allowed myself to get captured because everything I needed was set up. I mean, she's got the recordings ready. She hacked into ENN, like, which is essentially their news network, and it's like broadcast that around for people to see. It's just like, that's some next level scary genius. I love it. You know, quite the interesting anti-hero, I guess it's the role. She probably, I don't know if she go as far as even say she's the hero of the story. She might jokingly, but I don't know if she believes it. But it's like, right, I am doing good in the process of me getting my revenge. So it, you know, it all works out in the end. Yeah, it might be some sacrifice, some blood that needs to be shed in the process, but in the long run, it's for the purposes of getting justice. I even love that people in the bank were turning against Tyler. They're like, man, they already told you what to do to get the lady out of the vault, because the hostage that's held in the vault. You're just like, at first you're like, did they pick her for a reason? Like, it couldn't have just been an accident. Especially later on, Val's like, wait, she's from Inwood? Why would she come all the way here to go to a bank? But it's like, oh yeah, she got contacted by the bank manager about potential fraud of her identity. But it turns out she has a connection to Ming Glee because her and Ming were friends. And then Ming was working on a story, and her friend, the hostage, Arushi, she did not believe that it was a suicide, because it was just like, there's just like no way, because she's like, my friend was so excited about the story she was working on. And it's like, right, the number she had left was to a, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Deposit box, a safety deposit box. They pop it open, and Ming had left all her evidence. Oh, interestingly enough, it just happens to be at the same bank that this is all going down. It's like, man, well orchestrated, and all of it is proof that basically Tyler was working with the Bellocs while he was still working as a press person in the White House. And it turns out the two people that got booted for the past 2 episodes that was working at Fort Totten, those same people have connections as well. So it's like, man, this all runs deep. Like, they might not have known they either were willingly working with the Bellocs, or they were just unwilling pawns of like, yeah, like all the shady stuff you were doing trickled down from the Bellocs. Whatever the case may be, Tyler gets busted because he claims like, oh, I didn't kill her, but he did. The Bellocs are just the ones who disposed of the body. So makes you wonder how they're feeling about this when, like, slowly but surely, one by one, people you're associated with, the Bellocs got to be sweating a little bit, because it's like, okay, somebody's kind of gunning for us. And especially because Elena made it super public. So it's like, right, they were already gunning for her. Now it's like, oh no, I want you to know it's me. I'm making it super public that I'm in the public eye. I want you to know it's me that's coming for you, because it's going to make it that much sweeter when I take your heads, essentially, I think is the element and how the avenue in which they're kind of going down with that. So I think that's kind of interesting, because she didn't have to publicize it like that. She could have got one of her people, but she showed her face and everything, because I guess it's like, right, if someone's wearing a mask and it's like, no, I don't mind putting myself on display, because I want them to know it's me, because I'm going to be seen almost like some folk hero of legend with what I'm about to accomplish. It's going to go down in the history books type of thing. I wonder, have they made attempts on her life in the past, like since Argentina, because Argentina seems like, from what we know, that's the most recent attack, but there might have been more in more recent years as well. But I wonder, is that the first time they've come close to at least gotten that close? I mean, there's always threats, I'm sure, like ever since like the wedding, ever since like Sergei's like family died, I'm sure they've been gunning for them ever since, because they found out like, oh, like Sergei as well as Elena are still alive. So they've probably been gunning since then, but I'm assuming that well, because apparently Sergei died 18 months ago. So I'm wondering, is that supposed to be the last attack where, like, the Bellocs attacked and supposedly, like, oh, Sergei potentially died? or they probably faked his death. Because the fact is that Owen and him are in prison. They're like, Owen's like, oh, everything's going according to plan. Problem is, someone in the prison recognizes Sergei, and it's like, no, you're supposed to be dead. So that's why I'm like, so does the U.S. government not? Because I was under the impression like, oh, the U.S. government has him, like some very corrupt people has him just for this purpose. But it's like, no, I guess no one knows. Not even like the U.S. maybe knows that Sergei's there. I'm assuming they need him in the U.S. because this is like they need someone on the inside of the prison to kind of orchestrate stuff because it's a necessary piece to the puzzle that whatever it is that Elena's got planned, and they think they need Sergei in the prison, but they can't have anyone know he's here in the U.S. They can't let alone know he's in the prison because once again, I think it's that as the example, I can never shut up about it. If you've listened to enough of these reviews, you hear me have reference Lucky Number 11. I've not watched that movie in a couple years. I really love that movie. I've watched it multiple times. Twists and turns, like I've seen it multiple times, so I know the twists and turns in and out. But I will always go back to the Kansas City Shuffle. It's basically the rule of magic anyway. While they're so busy over here looking at the left hand, they don't realize what the right hand is doing. That's the general premise of the Kansas City Shuffle. It's just the basic principle of magic or illusions in general. That's what I think is happening here. Elena is the big old attention. Hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. While you're not seeing what's going down with Owen and Sergei. They've got their own part to play in this. So I guess it's correcting like something I misunderstood. Like I said, I thought the government knew Sergei was alive. They just didn't know that Elena knew that he was alive. But it's like, no one's supposed to know that he's alive because he's supposed to be dead. Like, I guess even because it's for the purposes of the Bellics thinking that they won, they probably think Elena's on her own. They probably thought like, oh, she's a wounded animal. Without Sergei, she's on her own. But I think they underestimate her. Because, once again, what did Sergei's mom say to Elena? The men are the face of the operation, but the women, they are the queens. They're the ones who really run shit. So that might be their impression. Like, oh, Sergei's gone, his woman. Without him, she's without him, she's lost. Like that organization is nothing. And it's like, which is interesting considering. Well, it seems like Valerie's the only one who takes Elena seriously as the threat she is. So that's why I'm wondering, is it supposed to play into that where like other organizations, even like the Bellics, don't take her seriously and underestimate her, and she's about to once again come for their heads, and that's going to be on them for underestimating her. So that's what I'm curious about, and the fact that Sergei's going to have to take care of that dude, and it's someone that he knew back in the day, and it's like, yeah, I take care. He tells Owen, I'm going to take care of it. Well, don't I always? So I'm like, oh, poor bastard. He recognized Sergei. He's like, oh, I must be mistaken. He realized what was going on. They're like, oh, I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. And poor kid's probably going to have to get killed for it. I'd say kid, but dude's probably older than me. Maybe about the same age, but whatever. Poor guy's going to get killed. And Sergei's going to have to do it. It's just like, yeah, can't have any loose ends, so. But to be fair, the same thing about, like, underestimating Elena. Same thing could be said about Valerie, especially their boss. No one wants to listen to Valerie. Valerie knows what she's talking about. Like, right, there are no coincidences. There's just, even Anthony is like, all right, I'm becoming a believer about all this. Because he's partway in because he wants to be a good friend and colleague to Valerie, but then their boss is the hard ass that he is, and like now Anthony even said like, I'm like ground beef, I'm like ground meat in between the both of you, like I'm trying to do my job, and but their boss is such a tool. He's so condescending. Like at some points he gives Valerie leeway, but in others he's like so certain he's right because he's telling her like, no, like, okay, he's like, no, leave the homicide. All right, you found this connection, but leave it at homicide. We got it. Basically, he wants to use a certain gas, which Valerie's like, it was literally used a year ago, and it killed 7 hostages. It's like, yeah, but we're going to have someone here to tweak the dosage. It's the fact is, if we don't do this, he even called it. He was like, yeah, the moment I get to it, when the clock hits 15, I'm going to call up my boss, and he's going to be like, all right, do it. When talking to the director, he's going to be like, okay, do it. And he does. Even though Elena gave the warning, oh, if anything happens to my people, it's not just you making the ground rules of, oh, if something happens to the hostages or one of your agents, it's going to be blood for blood. Same thing is going to happen to my people. Guns will go ablazing. It will be blood for blood. And still knowing that, he still went ahead with the gas because I was like, yeah, the gas will knock people out, but there's still a good chance it was going to kill someone. I figured as much something was going to go a little haywire the moment it's like, all right, what's wrong with the vents? It's like, yeah, but you told us to shut stuff down so the vents are shut. He's like, well, unclog it, block it so that we could use the Archon. And I'm like, at first I was like, I thought it was going to be a hassle to unblock it so they wouldn't be able to because of procedures he already put in place. But it's like, no, in fact, it actually helps them escape because he unblocked the vents the one vent they needed to get out because he was trying to send the gas in. So they just needed to buy their time and just, once again, make you look over here, not notice that, it's like, because Valerie's like, okay, they're gathering up the money for what purpose? The moment they were telling people to come there, I'm like, they're going to throw it off the roof as a distraction. And so it kind of helped. It acted as a way for them to blend into the crowd and fade out. But also, like, they were moving furniture to the side where the camera couldn't see them. And it's like, what was that? It's like, well, we figured it out after the fact. It's like, yeah, he's so quick to jump on stuff and not listen to Valerie. And because of that, they constantly get blindsided. It's like, cool. Every step of the way, you want to make it seem like, it's like the reason why he's so about like, no, we need to fix this mistake before it continues to spiral out into this debacle. It's because it makes him look bad, because every turn of this entire thing for the past 3 episodes now, including this episode, he's just screwed up on every major front. He hasn't seen every blind side, every swipe coming, only one who kind of has and kind of expected it and knows not to underestimate Elena has been Valerie. And even Anthony's now finally on board. So yeah, but luckily Valerie at the end of it was able to get some win. But the problem is, it's a win of arresting Tyler, but that's only because Elena gave you the win. But she's also probably like, no, but a win is a win. I'm not the black hat. It's just like, and she knows so much about Valerie. And it's like, oh, did you learn all that from my husband? She's like, I just want us to be friends. But she's like, no, that's never going to happen. Valerie's like, you're going to slip up at one point in time and I'm going to be there. And she's like, yeah, but not yet though. So we'll see. But she kind of did slip up, because I was wondering, did Owen actually give her a code? And when he gave her that 4-leaf code, he was like, good luck. Turns out he did give her help. She opens up a book and finds a flash drive. So whatever it is, whatever grand plan that Elena has, there's going to be a lot of probably death and devastation in the long run. Yes, you are kind of an avenging angel of sorts, but there's going to be a lot of casualties and some bad stuff along the way. So either it's to give Valerie a heads up about what she's got planned so you can handle it from yourself and cut her off at the pass, and not only deal with the Beluks, but also the Bell. I said the Beluks. It was almost like I was trying to say Belushis. Not only dealing with the Bellics, but also dealing with Elena at the same time. Not getting a head start on all this so you can take them down while also taking Elena down and stopping her from coming out victorious and potentially walking away from all of this and disappearing. So once again, there's a silver lining to all of Elena's machinations, because some form of justice is being enacted, because once again, like, Ming's death was just allocated to being a suicide. But I think she also takes offense to that too, because it's like, right, powerful people would able to just do away with people, because it's like, oh, you don't mean anything? Like, oh, like her and her dad, like, they meant nothing. So she ended up, no one really was going to miss her if they died. And I think the same thing was seen in Ming's, like, she was someone that was unraveling something, and they felt like she was someone that wasn't worth keeping around. So, like, the fact is, it wasn't just like the Bellics did it, like Tyler Erickson himself did it. So it's just like, right, someone who's so powerful wants to act so righteous, being like, because he was already such a condescending tool, the way he was like, yeah, I'm you know why they chose me? Because I'm the man the most trusted man in America. And he had the audacity to put his comb in Valerie's butt. He's like, you don't mind holding that for me? He was like, you tool. Luckily, she's like, oh, we don't need to get your DNA willingly. You gave it to me willingly on your cone, you stupid idiot. I'm like, flipping you the bird, man. You deserve it. You suck. I was like, yeah, you condescending prick. You're also about to let an innocent woman die, which would have been even more blood on your hands, because it would have been the innocent woman who's friends with the other innocent woman you murdered. It's like, yeah, all the flying middle fingers toward you, So it's definitely continuing to be such a fascinating and interesting show. I'm excited to see where the next episode ultimately ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good